The winter of 1974 brought something far colder than snow to British kitchens. It brought silence. The silence of empty cupboards, of families gathering round tables where ingenuity mattered more than abundance, where survival was measured not in comfort but in making it through to next week's wages. These were meals born not from choice but from necessity, cooked in the dim light of economic collapse, fuel shortages, and 3-day working weeks. This is the story of 10 forgotten dishes that kept working-class Britain alive when everything else was falling apart. The 1970s were Britain's harshest peacetime decade. Inflation soared beyond 20%. Power cuts plunged homes into darkness. Strikes paralyzed industry. For millions of working families, winter meant choosing between heating and eating, and the kitchen became the front line of survival itself. Number 10. Bread and dripping. Bread and dripping was the foundational meal of a generation facing ruin. Every Sunday, after the week's only roast, the fat would be scraped from the baking tin and left to set in a bowl by the stove. Come Monday morning, that congealed layer of beef dripping, flecked with dark jelly and fragments of meat, would be spread thick across yesterday's bread. The smell was almost meaty, the taste heavy with salt and animal fat. For families where wage packets barely stretched to Friday, this transformed leftovers into something that felt substantial. It was calorie-dense fuel for men heading to factory floors and children walking miles to school in worn-out shoes. Bread and dripping was never glamorous, but it was dependable, and dependability mattered more than anything else. What made it even more essential was how it stretched a single joint of meat across an entire week. Number 9. Bacon bone broth. Bacon bone broth turned waste into sustenance. Butchers would sell bacon bones for pennies, sometimes give them away entirely, and housewives knew exactly what to do with them. The bone would simmer for hours in a battered saucepan, releasing every trace of flavor and fat into the water. Potatoes, carrots, onions, whatever could be found, went in alongside. The result was a thin but nourishing soup that fed 4, sometimes 6 people. Kitchens filled with steam and the faint scent of smoke and pork. Children would dip bread into the broth, soaking up every last bit of warmth. It was a meal that asked for almost nothing and gave back just enough to keep bodies moving. In homes where the gas meter ran on shillings and every coin was counted twice, this was how you survived winter. The ingenuity didn't stop there. Number 8. Spam fritters. Spam fritters became a weeknight salvation when fresh meat was beyond reach. Tins of processed pork sat in cupboards as insurance against hunger, and when payday was still days away, those tins were opened. Thick slices of spam were dipped in a batter made from flour, water, and powdered egg, then fried in whatever fat remained from breakfast. The result was crispy on the outside, salty and dense within. Served with chips if there was money, or bread if there wasn't, spam fritters filled stomachs without emptying purses. Children didn't question it. Adults didn't apologize for it. This was simply what you ate when there was nothing else, and it tasted better than going without. But even spam fritters couldn't match the sheer resourcefulness of the next dish. Number 7. Sugar sandwiches. Sugar sandwiches were the meal nobody admitted to eating, yet everybody knew. When cupboards were bare and the week stretched endlessly ahead, white bread was buttered thinly, sprinkled with granulated sugar, and folded over. That was it. No substance, no nutrition, just sweetness and the illusion of a meal. Mothers made them for children coming home from school, their faces pinched with cold and hunger. The sugar provided a brief spike of energy, enough to last until supper, if supper came at all. It was a quiet admission of defeat, a marker of how far families had been pushed. Yet there was no shame in the kitchens where these sandwiches were made, only the grim determination to keep going. If you think that sounds desperate, consider what came next. If any of these meals stirred something in your memory, or if your own family had their own ways of making it through those winters, leave a comment below. The stories of survival deserve to be remembered. Number 6. Condensed milk on toast. Condensed milk on toast offered sweetness in the bleakest moments. Tins of carnation milk, thick and sugary, were kept for emergencies or special occasions, but when morale was as scarce as money, a spoonful spread over toasted bread became a small act of defiance. The milk would soak into the warm surface, turning golden and sticky. Children loved it. Parents tolerated it. It wasn't nourishing in any real sense, but it lifted spirits, and that mattered when everything else felt impossible. In homes where treat meant something far simpler than it does now, this was luxury. It was a reminder that survival wasn't just about calories. Yet even this paled beside the next entry. Number 5. Corned beef hash. Corned beef hash transformed a single tin into a meal for the whole family. A tin of corned beef, boiled potatoes, onions if available, all mashed together and fried until the edges crisped. The kitchen filled with the smell of salt and starch, and plates were cleared without a word. It was filling, cheap, and made from ingredients that lasted. Housewives could make it with their eyes closed, and they often did, after long shifts in factories or caring for neighbors' children to earn a few extra shillings. Corned beef hash was weeknight pragmatism at its finest, and it kept families going when nothing else could. But it was the next dish that truly defined an era. Number 4. Faggots and peas. Faggots and peas were the unsung hero of working-class tables. Made from offal, breadcrumbs, and herbs, pressed into dark brown balls and baked in rich gravy, faggots were cheaper than any recognizable cut of meat. Served with mushy peas and mashed potato, this was a meal that filled you completely. The smell of them cooking, heavy and savory, brought the family to the table without needing to be called. Faggots asked nothing of those who ate them except an appetite and a willingness to make do. They carried no pretension, only purpose. In the hardest winters, purpose was everything. And yet, there were meals that went even deeper. Number 3. Jam Roly-Poly pudding. Jam Roly-Poly pudding was dessert as survival. Suet pastry rolled thin, spread with cheap jam, rolled again and steamed until it swelled. Sliced thick and served with watered-down custard, it was stodgy, sweet, and filling. For families who couldn't afford meat more than twice a week, puddings like this weren't indulgence but necessity. They filled the gap left by everything else. Children scraped their bowls clean. Adults took second helpings without guilt. In kitchens across industrial towns, jam Roly-Poly was comfort and fuel combined. It wasn't about taste. It was about making it through. But even this couldn't compare to what came next. Number 2. Tripe and onions. Tripe and onions divided families, but it fed them all the same. The stomach lining of cows, pale and rubbery, was boiled until soft and cooked in milk with onions until it took on something close to flavor. It was an acquired taste, one many never acquired, but it was astonishingly cheap. For those who could stomach it, tripe was protein when protein was unaffordable. Served with bread or potatoes, it kept working men on their feet and children from going hungry. The smell lingered in hallways and clothes, unmistakable and unavoidable. Tripe wasn't loved, but it was needed, and that made all the difference. And now, the meal that symbolized survival itself. Number 1. Scouse. Scouse, the one-pot wonder of the British working class, stands alone. Mutton or beef scraps, potatoes, carrots, onions, all simmered together in one pot for hours until everything broke down into thick, savory stew. Scouse could feed 8 people from ingredients that cost almost nothing. It could be reheated endlessly, improving with each day. In Liverpool, in Manchester, in homes across the north, scouse was life itself. The pot sat on the stove from morning until night, filling the house with warmth and the promise that however hard things got, there would be something to eat. Scouse wasn't just food. It was solidarity, resilience, and survival in a single bowl. These meals weren't relics of a distant past. They were lifelines. They kept families together when everything conspired to pull them apart. They were cooked by people who had no choice but to be resourceful, no luxury but their own determination. If your family had their own winter meals, their own ways of making do, share them below. These stories matter. They remind us what survival really looks like. If this video brought back memories or taught you something new, consider subscribing to Britain Rewind. There's more history waiting to be told.